Um, does anybody have any public comment this morning? The only thing I wanted to mention was that I had talked to Chapin about a number of things, but one of them was he thought that the Conservation Commission would be interested in the fact that the Energy Committee is being formed and interviews are being taken. And I think at an upcoming select board meeting, they're going to talk about the coordinator position.
That sounds right. I think there's the next meeting that's coming up. They're doing interviews for the committee, and then the following meeting is intended at this point to be a discussion about funding a coordinator.
Reed, do you know where that was published? Was it?
You know, I'm not sure. I've been seeing it through the Sustainable Williston listserv. There's been a lot of direct communication between members and Eric Wells and the select board. So I'm hearing it secondhand, but I think if you went out and looked at maybe upcoming issues for select board, you might see it there.
Okay, I was just curious. I was just curious about how the public would know about it.
It was in Front Porch Forum, which publishes the agenda for the select board meetings. It was within the last couple of days there.
Oh, thanks, Carl. All right. Well, let's go on to looking at the minutes of November 3rd.
Minutes look great, Melinda.
Yeah, thank you, Melinda.
Yep. One question about this, Melinda. You know, we talked about the viewshed impact versus ecological impact issues and wanting to have a larger conversation about that. Do we have, or maybe it's a question for you, Laura, but do we have an idea of when we might be able to take a look at that?
I don't know. I have it on my list of things to put on the agenda at some point. Melinda, do you have a better idea of what's coming up?
Would that be addressed in that form-based code at all? I haven't been keeping up with that.
I don't think.
Melinda, if you're trying to talk, you're on mute.
Oh, did we lose Melinda?
I'm right here. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, we may be able to talk about it next time.
Even if we could just figure out where to start as a group,
Mhm.
even if we don't get very far into the conversation, I just don't want to lose track of that. That was an
Mhm.
important takeaway from trying to review the Trinity Baptist application.
That's a good idea, Reed. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a full conversation. We can fit it in.
Terry, the form-based code applies, as I understand it, just to the town center.
Yeah,
not
to the
the
growth
RC.
center.
Oh, that's right. And were they maybe thinking about expanding it if it works there to the RZD? I think somebody mentioned that was a thought down the road.
No, right now it's just really, it's relegated to the Taft Corners district, and there's no intention of spreading it out beyond that.
So it sounds like just a separate conversation. As Reed suggested, doesn't have to be like nested within something else.
Right, we'll put that on the agenda for next time.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
I'll
there-
second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? And is anyone abstaining?
I guess
Okay, then-
I am because I wasn't there.
Okay, thanks, Gary. All right, the minutes have been approved. Thank you, Melinda. It really helps me to read such detailed minutes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for capturing that whole conversation with Trinity Baptist. That was helpful.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a tough one.
Nick Werner.
Hey, Nick.
Where is Nick?
Good morning.
Morning. I've given you co-hosting privileges. Are you able to share this?
Oh, I can. I did send out materials. I was not going to put them on screen, but I can do that.
If you wish. I just thought it would be easier if you do want to display things to just do it yourself so that you can be driving.
Right. I didn't put together a PowerPoint or anything this year. Excuse me?
What? No
Oh,
PowerPoint?
sorry. Multiple conversations. But I can certainly, the materials I sent along were the materials related to our annual report and so forth. I can,
Yeah, Nick, sorry. For easy access, if you just go to our agenda page, they're linked right there.
okay, gotcha.
I can even put a link in there for you. if you want. Let's see.
Shoot. Melinda, is there any chance you could put those up? I'm having issues here.
You click on the link in the chat.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. All right. Haven't done it that way before.
And then just, the materials should all be linked there, so.
Not everybody's a master presenter like you, Melinda.
I haven't done it this way before. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No worries.
I admit I don't know how to move this to the screen.
So if you see on the bottom, the share screen button. You see on the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be a share screen button in the menu.
Yes.
If you click on
Okay.
that
Yep.
and then click on the screen you want to share.
Okay,
There
there's
you
our
go.
annual, okay, there's our
Yes.
annual report. Okay.
Awesome.
Learn something every day, even at 7:10 in the morning.
Mhm.
Should I just get started?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having me at the meeting. It's been a while. A lot of things have happened. I think, and we'll talk more specifically about the Jacob property and follow up with that. But more broadly speaking, we have sent our materials into our annual report and materials to Eric and the town, and we're going to be on a select board agenda probably in late January to answer any questions the select board might have. We feel as if the park district's in a lot better shape than we could have anticipated at the beginning of the pandemic. And as you know, with natural areas everywhere, in the beginning, we weren't sure what was what and how we were going to manage things with public health. And then we were completely overrun with people seeking the outdoors. Happily, that trend has continued. We've been quite stunned at the level of participation, especially at our parks that have easily accessed trails. And we've had a really laser focus on being a good host and making sure that we're providing a good environment for people. COVID presented challenges to all of us. For us, we leaned into it and we're able to get funding to keep our tenants whole. We rent to a preschool and we rent to a museum. We also have 2 caretaker houses. We were able to leverage federal and state resources to keep them whole during the crisis. And they are actually doing quite well. We actually had to expand the preschool because of demand. I gave up my old office and got special zoning dispensation from the city of Burlington. We expanded that. So we've got increased amount of enrollment there. We've got significantly increased use of our parks. We've been able to leverage, at last count, about $340,000 in grant money for a variety of things. We're going to be completely redoing our signage system and our communications. We upgraded our computer equipment, so we all have new laptops, which frankly right now is huge in terms of us being able to function. We brought in $250,000 for renovating the museum barn at Ethan Allen Homestead through Leahy, one of his last acts before he had decided not to run again.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah, we're thrilled. That was
It's gonna be an awesome project.
An awesome project. It's for people that don't know, it's the Alno-Biwe is a confederation of the 4 main Abenaki tribes formed specifically to have they call it a radically apolitical cultural conversation and to develop essentially what will be a combined museum with Ethan Allen Homestead and with Abenaki culture. It's already happening. We've been working on it for the last 3 years, and now we're going to be able to renovate that building, which was first renovated in 1986. So we're thrilled about that. We've also had an assessment done on the Colchester Pond farmhouse and barn. We had that done a couple of years ago, and now and we got an extra donation of 10 acres of land. They're looking at creating a new north access and renovating the buildings there after we get rolling on the Ethan Allen Homestead. So somehow with all this going on, we find that actually funders are being generous and that we are able to get capital things done. We did have had a period of time there of 10 months or so we had to, last summer, we did not hire our seasonal staff because of financial unsureties. That's not a word, is it? Unsurety is not a word. Strike that from the notes. I don't know how I came up with that. But the bottom line is that Tim, our park superintendent, and Remy, who was a full-time employee with us, did all the maintenance, and all of us kind of divvied up the work. We were all picking up trash, we were all cutting brush. And thankfully, the financial hit on towns, although it's been very uneven across the 7 towns we work with, has not been as much as we might have anticipated. So we were able to hire staff again this year, although we did not hire a full complement. And they just finished up this past week. And it's a long way of saying we were able to tread water for a long time. I feel really good about the condition of parks during that. And now in the last year, we've really been able to lean into our jobs in terms of capital upgrades and improving the system. I'm happy to say we're closing out the whole Durway Cove deal, which involved the multiple forms of loans and so forth. So we have a closing for that converts a loan into a grant. That park is in super good shape. And we are still working on looking at a couple other properties, but we're being very careful and very intentional about making sure we don't grow our system too fast based on the resources that we have at hand. But I must say that, and I know questions always come up about the budget, that in general terms, we're feeling pretty strongly that we're really able to keep the reins tight on the organization in terms of how much we're getting done relative to the dollars spent. What's really been helpful with that are 2 things. One is our growing ability to lease space and improvement of space. One thing that the renovation at the Ethan Allen Homestead is going to do is going to allow us to charge for more interior space, which for our organization is huge. And also we've done some renovations on the picnic shelter, and towards the end of the summer, we got slammed with requests. As you can imagine, having a safe outdoor space with a working fireplace in this environment is a really good thing. We expect that to kind of go through the roof next year. We've redone our lease with the preschool. We have a number of things going on in that area. Another piece which really helps us is the contracted work. We've done some with Melinda this year, and some with South Burlington, and some with Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District. We did a great project with them. Tim is going to be reaching out to all of our towns over the next few months to put together a schedule for next year. The basic formula is that we charge, we take our base rate and we add 50% to it, and that's it. And there's no markup. We carry the same insurance. It's a great deal for the towns. It's a great deal for us in terms of generating revenue and also building partnerships. So the basic model we've been working with hasn't changed a whole lot. We've had to really improvise over the last 18 months, but we find ourselves actually in a stronger position than I could have anticipated. It's careful use of language. So we feel like we're going into this coming fiscal year in a good spot. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of morph, and people just throw questions at me as we go, but I'm just going to morph and talk a little bit about the Jacob property, if that's okay. Is that okay, Melinda? Just move right into that. So as you know, we've been talking with the church, and there was a period of time when there was not a whole lot of communication going on. I was working with Pastor Randy Boardman, a great guy. He had some family issues last summer. He was unsure what's going on with the development. And then over the last few weeks, all of a sudden, everything accelerated. Randy reached out to me and let me know what was going on with the development. And obviously, I've read the notes from the presentation that they did at your last meeting. our role is to promote whatever is the best outcome. One outcome we've talked about is the Park District taking over the property, but regardless of whether that's the outcome, we're still going to work on getting this access in place because we have the relationships and the momentum. So I really am kind of laser focused. And I really, really appreciate the minutes from the last meeting, the questions you asked, those are all the questions that need to be asked. I see the piece about mountain biking, and obviously we're not really set up to be a manager of a property that hosts mountain biking. We are set up to very much so to manage properties that have bike paths that run through them, or as part of the property or along the side of them. But in terms of mountain biking, that's a whole nother level of management. Whether or not the Park District takes that on long term is maybe a conversation for my board and a future director, but up to date, we have not taken on those kinds of properties because we feel like we need to have a higher level of management. I think there's also just concerns of the board that it's a whole different philosophy. So it's a discussion we haven't taken up for a while, but with your permission, when I go back to the board, we have our next meetings on December 6th. I will discuss that and say, we need to think more about this, and we don't want to say no forever to anything, but I think the way we're set up right now would be problematic for us to manage a property that is being used for mountain biking. I was also, and I'm going to follow up with Melinda on this, I'm also really intrigued by the habitat assessments. We have two protocols that we use. One is a natural resource inventory. We've used consultants like Brett Engstrom and Alicia Daniel to do very detailed assessments of the property that we're considering purchasing or that we're placing an easement on. These are very powerful documents. They're some of my favorite documents to read. So I am just generally intrigued about whether these studies become more standardized. I want to see what other people are doing. It's a really core part of what we're doing, especially with evolving climate change, water quality issues. Our whole lens as we look at properties is shifting quite properly towards really prioritizing getting these high value conservation lands under ownership and management. So it's just a long way of saying I'm really thrilled you guys are doing the same thing in parallel. I'm really intrigued to getting a hold of some of these documents. So we have the natural resources protocol. The other thing we do is the land acquisition methodology, which is a screen that's been fine-tuned over time that we went through with the Jacob property to sort of pre-approve. It goes through all the practical, financial, ecological management aspects of a property that we have to consider before taking on as an asset for the Park District. That also, to me, is a very powerful document, is really at the core of what we do. So, sorry, quick summary. So in any scenario, the Park District is committed to working through this access issue if we can be helpful. The board is still extremely committed and interested in owning and managing this property if that's the appropriate outcome after this process. We are now, in terms of our availability of staff and time and energy and focus right now as we shift into the winter season. Tim is already chomping at the bit to get back out there and do another walkover, relook at the access. We have a whole list of tasks that we could do, but this obviously the development is evolving, and in a way, if something could be secured in the context of the development, to me that's in many ways a better outcome than securing an easement that might be moved later, because then it's there permanently. We can codify it, put it under easement, and having worked in public development for a long time, new housing is a great thing. So I can go in straight face and say, congratulations for getting this rolling. How can we be helpful to make this happen? But everything I'm doing, obviously, we have no agency in this except for as a partner to the town right now. So my communications with anything to do with the church is totally in the context of the town with conservation board, and everyone knows that. So we're really well positioned to take the next step. We weren't so much about a year ago, but we are now. I just want to express that despite the time lag and everything that's happened, we are still very focused and feeling positive about that project.
Nick, can I ask a question
Yes.
of the commission?
Yes.
Laura and Melinda, I heard the mention about mountain biking with relation to the Jacob parcel. I thought that was a question that came up during the conversation with Trinity Baptist, but that we stated that at this point there's not intention to allow mountain biking on the parcel. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. So yeah, Nick, you shouldn't worry about taking it back to your board and trying to see if they're going to be open for it, because I think it was just a question whether there was going to be mountain biking there.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's
I
lots of
misunderstood.
mountain biking in Williston already.
Mhm.
I think
It's, I mean,
the local
just
people are there.
Yeah. I mean, that's another question. Would changes in the rules of the use of the property displace existing uses? That's another consideration going in. I don't know if it's been established. We haven't seen a whole lot of mountain biking back there, but there are certainly bikes that have gone through there. But that's something to deal with in the future. But now I understand better what the context is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Nick, while we've got you interrupted,
Yes.
I'll just say on the habitat disturbance thing, that came up last week, and when we were reviewing the Trinity Baptist parcel, which is proposed for a large development, and that reviewing that parcel and that conversation made us realize that we may be overly weighting the visual assessment element in our development review process, more so than we should be when we don't have habitat disturbance assessment data yet. So we have the visual assessment piece is done for the whole town, has been done for a long time, probably needs to be updated. But and so the conversation that we need to have is just how do we go about fairly evaluating visual impact versus habitat impact when we don't have all the information at the same time.
Gotcha. Interesting.
And
I mean,
that's layered on top of the prior conversation about the fact that a lot of times the assessments we see, we don't know, we haven't seen any saying that there's going to be what's the word, Melinda? I always get it wrong. Not significant impact, but
Yeah.
Undue adverse impact. That's what it is. Undue adverse impact. So we almost never see that. And so it just begged the question to us, are the assessments being rigorous enough or standardized enough when they are coming from someone employed by the person applying? So
right.
That was our first
Yep.
conversation. And then the
Yeah.
second layer last week was, well, wait a minute, we have all this information about our view sheds that we want to conserve, but we don't yet have the ecological impact information to weigh it against. So it's becoming a more complex thing for us.
And once again, you guys are on the leading edge. City of Burlington's putting together a really intriguing part of the zoning ordinance that talks about natural systems. And it just begs the question, so how does that get, this is a whole different discussion for a different day, but how does that get evaluated? And so then these documents become more or less legal documents. And that's what really hit me is we did our habitat assessment that we hired Brett Engstrom to do for the Durway Cove thing, and it became a legal document that was part of our entire process. And that really hit me. This little 2-page document actually drove the entire decision-making process. And so, it just intrigued me that you guys are dealing with the same issue relative to development. And it's, in terms of my job, it's like right at the pivot point. Because I think in the future, there's going to be more attention paid at the local level to, you know, water quality, ecological, global warming issues. It's already happening in Burlington. And so if you're a developer and you're trying to get through that screen, who do you call to get the assessment done to present to the conservation board? And what is the criteria that you guys are going to look for? I just, it's kind of a side issue, but I'm really intrigued about that. I want to learn more and see how you guys work through the process. And interesting, I think other towns are moving a little bit more towards your model of having, you know, established overlays and goals for conservation. So it's a bit of a side issue, but it impacts Jacob. It's a fascinating thing, and that property, the location of that property and what it buffers and what it represents to me is also highly intriguing, because you've got the, you know, semi-intense residential development on one side, you got the river, and then you got Global Foundries on the other side. So it's an important sort of keystone conservation recreation piece for that area. So anyway, I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I was very intrigued by that and how that all is going to sugar out for all of us over the next 5-10 years, really, frankly. Any questions or issues for me at this time? Because I think I'll probably be back if Jacob keeps moving the way it's going. I did get permission from the church to directly contact Brian Courier. I did send him an email. I didn't expect a quick response because he's probably scratching his head and saying, okay, how do these guys fit into this? But I just put it out there and said, you know, I run the park district. I'm working closely with the town of Williston, talking about this park as a community asset, and you know, just very generic letter trying to be helpful. I do understand the process and that the timing of any granting of an easement impacts them in terms of whether or not they get credit for it in the zoning process. We tend to want to go with whatever works in the system. So we're not going to, you know, I'm not sure exactly how the whole sequence works, but my gut is telling me that the church really, I mean, they've been actually really great with us all the way through, and Randy's been tremendous. So there's never been a moment where they said no. They've just said, well, we got to keep room for the development. We got to have some flexibility going forward. So now that the development is actually being planned, I am hopeful that we hear back from Brian. And I'd like, once again, this is in the context of Melinda, we have no skin in the game from a ownership standpoint, but I think, the park district is positioned to give the developer really a great way to accommodate that part of their plan. And frankly, it'd be such a quality of life thing for the people living there. I'd love to move into a new neighborhood that had a trailhead. I mean, nowadays that's seen a lot more as a positive. Anyway, so any other questions or concerns or input that would be helpful at this point?
I guess I have a question for, is that Carl? Okay, I have a question for Melinda, I guess. Just how tied is the access to the parcel tied to the approval of the development? Because I know we've asked for some significant changing in their location of the roads and developments. So does that have a lot of weight to it, or is it
You
just
mean, are you just talking about the trail easement and the parking?
Right, correct.
Yeah, so that is going to have an impact on their ability to score points in growth management. So it's not like, yeah, so the leverage is really in growth management. So they need to score 30 points in order to be able to get allocation for the dwelling units that they want to build. And so in order to do that, the provision of access and a trail will give them, up to 10 points of those 30 points. So that's a valuable thing for them. they don't have a lot of ways that they can score points. But the provision of a trail is one way. As far as requiring a trail easement, yeah, I mean, that's something the DRB is going to have to decide. Ultimately, you know, you've made a recommendation, and if the DRB decides to turn that recommendation, you know, at DP into a condition, then it will be required. So that's, you know, I guess that's how I guess I can try to answer the question at this point. But yeah.
So
I mean,
basically, it has significant weight, and
yeah,
given their opportunity to earn points,
right.
and it depends on what the DRB does with our recommendation.
Right, and so right now is pre-application, and it's not really going to come into play until next March when they go through the growth management hearing. And at that time, they're going to be promising certain things to get points. And so if they promise to provide the town a trail and access, then they have to follow through on that promise. And that's generally how it works.
There's, right now, there's several developments in front of them. So this might not happen for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many units allowed to be built per year in
Right.
Williston.
Right.
So this could be out like 3 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is not going to get solved in the next, by March, or even in March.
Well, only in that it could move forward.
The
you know.
promises are
Yeah,
made in March.
If they promise a trail easement, then presumably, you know, if they're ready to move forward on that, we can move forward on that.
Oh, okay.
You know, but,
Okay, that
Yeah.
was my question now.
right.
And from that perspective, we had gotten as far as having our attorney prepare a draft easement, which basically tries to mimic the town's easement as much as possible, the existing easement you have on the edge of Global Foundries that you just got codified with Bittersweet neighborhood and is now fully executed in town records. So our attorney, Ed Fitzpatrick, had prepared a draft, and that's when Randy threw up his hands and said, well, the development's coming, we have to look at this. So and my board, as we discuss it, and like I said, they're still very supportive and enthusiastic about the project. And I explained to them that the timing of when the developer would make a commitment is important in terms of whether they get credit or not. If they make a commitment now, you know, in the wrong part of the process. So whatever role we can play to make this work from a sequencing standpoint and supporting it with legal work and coordinating with the town, anything we can do to be helpful. Tim had suggested, you know, maybe it's time for another site walk if we get to the next level. You know, it sounds like this. My next question is, what's the time? It sounds like spring is when it's going to be considered. Maybe when the snow clears, or even when there's still snow on the ground, we do another walk, which we did before, was very successful, to get people, you know, tied into the property and to talk about the access. So whatever we can do to be helpful, we'd be very interested in doing proactively. And, you know, Melinda knows that we work together on this. It's just, there's been a lull where Randy felt disempowered to do anything. He wasn't sure about the development. He had some stuff going on with his family. I thought the whole thing was falling apart. Then all of a sudden, the development started to come together and the conversation began again. So we're thrilled that that's starting again. And we're still feeling as if the church, as they always have from the beginning, when I first called them, I said, yeah, we're very interested. So on the church side, they're definitely lined up. They want to be supportive. They want the community to have access. They see it as a win-win for everybody. You know, the kids at their school can use it, their parishioners, the new housing development. So I just want to emphasize that if it gets bumpy in the process, it's not because of a lack of support on the church side. They've been wonderful from the beginning. So just want to express that. And permit reviews always hit bumps. So I just want to remind people where they started was from a good place.
Thank you, Nick.
Yes, thank you.
So did you want to go over, besides the Jacob parcel, your budget and those other documents?
If you'd like to, it's up to you. It's, all the, not a whole lot has changed in terms of how we operate. It's a matter of, and I'd be happy to go through every single line item if you'd like, which I know you don't want to, but the point is that our overall ask of towns last year was 357, 734. This year it's 381, 550. The overall increase in our ask is 6.7%. Our overall increase of ask of the town of Williston is 3.9%. That's a function of the formula. That's a function of Burlington and Winooski ironically growing their populations and their, that it's all to the dollar calculated with the formula that we've been using for the last 43 some odd years. It was a very active discussion, a really carefully put together budget. If we need to, basically we're carrying 3 full-time employees with significant experience. We did not fill the 4th employee. We had Remy Kretal working with us full-time for a couple of years. We essentially just demised that position. So we still have a model of a very tight core, and then we hire seasonals to supplement, and we leverage hugely with volunteers and partnerships and grants and donations and so forth. So the model remains the same. We are incrementally growing over time. Last year, we added 10 acres to Colchester Pond. Like I said, Durway Cove is finalized. There's a couple other properties down there that might be donated at the river mouth or sold, hopefully donated. There's the Jacob parcel. But we are, I must tell you right now, we are really focused on capital upgrades. There's a lot of our assets have been essentially the same since the mid-90s. And so we've been very methodically going through all our bridges and puncheons and trail systems, and the signage is getting replaced this year. I'd be happy to split it up and talk through every line item, but we are a personnel heavy budget because that's how the system works.
That was going to be my question for you, Nick, was about the personnel aspect
Yes.
of the budget, because overall it's not going up a lot. And for Williston, our share is not going up that much. So I don't foresee that being so much of a challenge. But you mentioned that this year you were able to hire back more staff than maybe you had anticipated.
Yes.
What does it look like for this next upcoming fiscal year?
Oh, we project 3 seasonal staff. If we get, and we had basically 2.5 this year. We had 2 lasted the whole summer. Then we had a college kid who was great, who worked with us for a couple months in the middle of the summer. We would like to have 3 seasonal staff for the entire season next year. A 4th if we get enough contracted work, because we're going to pretty heavily market that this year. And that's carried as part of it is carried as our operating budget. If we exceed our goals in the operating budget, then it becomes an enterprise fund and we can hire extra people. We have enough flexibility to operate that way. So no, that's a great question. No, the seasonals are absolutely critical to our operations. So we're thrilled that we've planned for 3. And there, if we get blowback or some disaster, or, whatever, we can cut that number back, but we don't anticipate that. We carry about $220,000 in capital reserves. That number has been pretty stable since I've been here. We dip into it and then we replenish it each year. If we're able to underspend our operating budget, we roll that right into capital, or we bring in small donations. So I feel structurally, we've got our capital reserves. We've got, like I said, $340,000 a grant for capital upgrades, new contracts in place for our tenants. So we're feeling actually structurally in really good shape in a way that, like I said, we couldn't have necessarily anticipated a year ago. We just didn't know. And what's going to be interesting this year is each town has its own issues, its own DNA, its own accommodation to COVID and you know, the changes we've all been through. So it's an interesting round of communications this year. And then the ARPA money, you know, do we spend it? Do we rainy day fund it? You know, who knows? Yeah, we're thrilled. Go back to your original question. We're planning on the 3 seasonals and a 4th if we can afford it.
Nick, I just wanted to mention that I think 4 of the Forest preschool teachers are taking the Burlington Vermont Master Naturalist training. So they're being
Oh,
trained by
great.
Daniel. They are a great bunch and they're
Oh, they
just
are.
so enthusiastic. So I just thought you'd be interested in that.
I know that's great. No, they're fantastic. They've done a great job. They're a great tenant and they help carry out our mission as well. And they integrate with everything that's going on down there. So yeah, thank you for that. That's interesting.
Melinda, do you need an action from the commission on the budget request?
Not necessarily. I mean, you know, you don't need to take a formal vote or anything, but, you know, just if you know, I can write in the minutes whether you're supportive or not. I'm assuming you're supportive, but
I don't have any concerns.
Yeah. Is there anyone that's not supportive? Okay, so yeah, we're all supportive, Nick.
Thank you.
That
Melinda.
sounds like an informal vote.
It was.
I'm wondering if we should just vote so that it like strengthens it. Like, is it beneficial that there's like the formal support from the committee or from the commission?
I agree.
Nico's gonna vote too, obviously, because he's here.
Yeah, I agree, Kim.
Yeah.
I'll move to support the request from the Williston Valley Park District for Williston this year.
You want to put the dollar amount in your
Sure.
38,689.
Yep.
Yes.
I'll second that.
I'll second. Oh, Carl seconded before me.
Okay, Carl seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting signify by saying aye.
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 Is there
Aye.
anyone opposed? All right, we have accepted the proposal from the WVPD for the suggested amount of money to forward to the select board.
Thank you. Thank you so
Nick.
much. And
Thanks, Nick.
one last thing, we need a trustee. We need a trustee from Williston. So I just touched base with Eric. We might put an ad out and we don't have one right now from Williston. So
Okay, what does the trustee do? I mean, besides being a
Well-
trustee?
well, we do meet monthly. It's a very active board. And we meet every 3rd Tuesday at 4:30. You know, there's 7 towns represented. Each trustee brings a different skill set and different contribution. It's a great group. It's very involved. I must say it's a fun board. I do all the minutes and agendas, so it's not a huge administrative burden. And what can I say? John was great. We miss John, but I guess he took early retirement. Is he around anymore? John Nittler? Did he leave town or is, just curious? Haven't heard from him.
I may be speaking out of, I don't know. I wanted to ask Reed Willis, who is here and comes to every commission meeting, but is not a member of the commission, if you'd be interested in being a trustee for the Winooski Valley Park District. Just a thought.
I'd have to. Sorry,
Okay,
this is Reed. This is Reed. I just have to know more about it and think about it.
Why don't you pop me an email and let's find a time to chat. I'd be happy to and I could send you all the materials and contact info for the other trustees if you want to chat with them.
What a great idea, Melinda. And if
Sorry
that
if I,
were,
yeah. I didn't want to.
well, I was just gonna add, if that were to work out and it's something that Reed ends up being interested in, it would be just so amazing if you wanted to continue to sometimes attend these meetings, because I do feel like one thing that would be awesome is if the trustee interfaced with us a little bit more regularly, and you're already doing
Yes.
that as a member of the citizenry.
I hear you.
Agree,
We would
Kim.
feel lonely if you weren't there, Reed.
That's a great point. That benefits all of us. And that was some feedback that we've gotten about past actions. So that'd be great. Yeah. So
Okay.
Reed, why don't you pop me an email and then we can connect and chat. And I'll send you some information. And I think you'd find it fun. It's a good group. It really is. They're very active and very engaged. So I think you would enjoy it.
Nick,
Okay.
do you meet in person or do you meet remotely these days?
We're meeting remotely now. We had exactly one in-person meeting this year. And then the Delta variant kind of chased us back to our.
When you
our
do meet in
quarters.
person, is it down at Ethan Allen Homestead?
Yes. Yeah, it's down at the homestead. And actually that's where I originate the meeting, just like Melinda does, to meet the public requirements. But currently we're meeting virtually. We anticipate that to continue probably at least through the calendar year or early next spring.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was really informative.
Thank you for having me. And I'm available anytime. Like I said, I suspect we'll be talking again about Jacob. I hope we will in the next few months. So thank you for your support. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Take care. You too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so the next thing on our agenda, and I think I just saw Mark here. Oh, there he is. Hi, Mark. Are you, is your name Mark or Marco?
My name is Mark.
Okay, and what's your last name, just so Melinda can write it down?
Sure, it's Milazzo, Milazzo.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome. I'm Laura Meyer. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. Melinda Scott is our conservation planner for the town of Williston. I see Meg Handler is on. I know you and Meg have been working together on the statewide wake boat regulations, and you've been working with someone at the DEC, I think. So we're looking forward to your presentation on wake boats.
Great.
Mark, just before you get started, do you have anything you would like to share to the screen?
I do have a presentation, so.
Let me, I'm gonna give you screen sharing privileges.
Okay.
So that you can do that. Just bear with me for a second.
I love hearing you call them privileges, Melinda, because you can take them back away.
All right. Hold on a second.
Hi, Meg. Nice to see you.
Co-host, all right. Okay, so I have just made you a co-host and you should be able to share your screen via the green share screen button on the bottom of the Zoom menu.
Okay.
And yeah, there you go. Okay.
Okay, Meg, I don't know if you want to say any opening words or you want me to just jump right into it.
I think it's fine if you just jump right in. I mean, I have spoken briefly with Laura, so I think maybe the Conservation Commission is aware at least of the outline of what we've been working on.
Okay. Well, great. My name is Mark Milazzo, as I mentioned earlier. I live up in the Northeast Kingdom in a town called Peacham, Vermont, and I'm on a small little pond called Peacham Pond. It's about 330 acres. I spent my career in the IT world, and I'm retired now, which is really nice. So I want to, again, appreciate you letting us talk to you today. Talk to you a little bit about wake boats, wake enhanced water activities, kind of an overview of the issues, concerns, and why we as a group feel there's a need to protect our lakes and ponds. From an agenda standpoint, again, I'll take you an overview of wake boats and the associated water sports activities. Talk about the concerns from an invasive species standpoint, environmental and safety standpoint, and then as a view across the country in terms of a growing call to regulate, and then we'll leave some time for question and answers. So what is a wake boat? A wake boat, I guess the best way to describe it is, there's a couple of things I think that are unique about the boat. So if you go to the bottom right-hand picture, you'll see there's two boats. Direct drive, maybe many of us are familiar with, like a ski boat. The motor sits in the middle of the boat, and then the drive shaft exits towards the back of the boat. In a wake boat or a V-drive boat, they push the motor back as far as they can in the boat. The shaft comes out the front of the motor and then does a V and exits back out of the bottom of the boat. They do this is done from a design standpoint to greatly increase the weight in the back of the boat. And that's done to increase the wakes, and they can be anywhere from 2 to 5 feet. A number of companies manufacture these boats. They can run up to $250,000. But you can take an existing inboard or inboard outboard and you can modify it by adding weight or hydrofoil plates to the bottom of the boat, the hull. The other thing about wake boats is they have typically sealed ballast tanks in them. They can have a number of ballast tanks in them, and they can hold anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 gallons of water. Some even go up to as high as 5,000 gallons of water. And they take that in basically to lower the boat into the water. The more water that's displaced, the larger the weight. And they can move the water in and out of these boats in a very quick time, less than 3 minutes. So they've got pumps on taking the water in and pumps taking the water out. The associated water sports activities go along that. Today, we're going to talk about wakeboarding and wake surfing. Wakeboarding is basically, it's a short board with foot bindings. You get towed behind the boat. You have a pretty good size wake on, behind the boat, and you just keep riding back and forth, doing jumps, aerial maneuvers. Wake surfing is where you get pulled up behind the boat, again with a rope, but once you're up, you drop that rope, and you ride the steep face of the wave behind the boat. Very similar to, I guess, surfing. And if you're a visual person like me, I think pictures help in trying to describe it. So on the left-hand side, you have wake surfing. So you can see that boat sitting down in the water, top left-hand corner. It's sitting down in the water quite a bit. All the folks are trying to pull that down as far as they can. And then you've got a person on the top and the bottom picture riding that wake. On the left-hand side, you've got wakeboarding. Again, kind of an even wake on either side of the boat, and the person just is going back and forth. So a lot of data here, but I think this is important for folks to understand. So in this chart, from left to right at the top, you have the vessel and the distance from shore, a cruising boat like a ski boat, then a wake boat, wake surfing, and the percentage increase of a wakeboard and a wake surfing boat over a cruising boat. So at 100 feet, a cruising boat has a foot-pounds force of 2,587 foot-pounds. A wakeboard, is not quite double that, but close, 4,346 foot-pounds. Wake surfing, the force of the wave goes up quite a bit. It's up over 17,000 foot-pounds. And then you can see the percentage increase from a wakeboard and wake surfing over a cruising boat. And then I think the thing to note, I won't go into all the other data, but if you go down to 500 feet from shore, you can see that the wakeboard force of the wakeboard wave is still pretty close to a cruising force of the wave at 100. That a cruising boat was at 100. The wakeboard is at 500 feet. But then if you go to the next column in wake surfing, you can see that the force at 500 feet is still twice what the cruising boat was at 100 feet. The other thing to note about wake boats is the speed at which they operate. They tend to operate in what we call what's called semi-planing mode. So between 6 and 12 miles an hour. And the wave height is dependent on the boat's speed. So when you're operating, so as you can see, between 6 and 12, you have a pretty high wave height. But then as you start to plane out in the boat, go faster, the wave height comes down. So key points on wake boats. They produce much higher waves than typical cruising boats, water skiing boats, and the waves are longer and much more energetic. They operate at slow speeds between 6 and 12 miles an hour, as mentioned, and they're about 10 to 25 times more powerful than that of a boat operated on plane. The energy in a boat wake goes up exponentially with wave height. So that means that a 2-foot wave is 4 times as powerful as a 1-foot wave, and a 3-foot wave is 9 times as powerful. So if you go back to the early in the presentation, when I talked about the size of the waves that the wake boats create. And the market, this is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing market in water sports boats. In 2020, the sales increased by 30%. So the concerns. The ballast tanks in these boats are typically sealed. So in other words, they can't be inspected. I don't know about Lake Iroquois or the lakes around the Burlington area, but I know here in Peacham, a few years ago, we invested and we have somebody that inspects boats as they go in and out of the water. Unfortunately, with these ballast tanks, because they're sealed in these wake boats, you can't inspect them. So our inspector can't look at those. And even a few gallons of water can contain a lot of invasive species that can then get transported to the next lake. And this is, typically, so even more important or concerning when you get to what I guess would be called day trippers. So somebody's coming into a lake where there are invasive species, taking it out and going to another lake where there aren't invasive species. The industry, the wake boat industry, knows they've got a problem. They're investing millions of dollars to try to fix this, through new designs or aftermarket flushing systems. So this just talks about a couple of lakes out west. The big concern in Lake Tahoe and Lake Mead around, invasive species in these boats. So they're requiring that ballast tanks be decontaminated every time they exit the water using hot water. Well, unfortunately, you've got to get your water temperature up over 140 degrees to really start to kill these invasive species. But the motor crafts, the pumps within and the motors within the wake boats can't handle that temperature. So then they're also using decontamination solution, which isn't really a good idea for the environment. So this study said that at the bottom, the spread of AIS is 10 times the likelihood of spread with a wake boat versus a typical boat. And also the USDA Fish and Wildlife Boat Inspection Procedures, talks about it was ocean-going ships that first brought quagga and zebra mussels into the Great Lakes. And these internal ballast tanks in ski boats, they have the same risk as those ocean-going ships. From a safety standpoint, so you talked about the weights that these boats create, and then the impact, the size of those wakes, the force of those wakes. So I've been involved in this group since I think April, and just doing all the research, doing the studies or reviewing the studies, that the danger to small craft. You've got paddle boards, kayaking, stories of damage to other boaters, watercraft at docks, boats slamming into docks, breaking mooring lines, and danger to swimming, kids in the water. One story, from I think it was Georgia, when the wake boats come out, this family literally gets their kids out of the water because of the size and the power of the waves. So I wanted to show you this video. It's a really, really short one, but I think it gives you a sense of the power of the wake. And again, I'm a visual person, so I hope you don't mind. So let's see if we can get this. I'm hoping you can hear this.
Yes.
I guess I can't hear it. It's choppy.
Yeah, sound is incomprehensible, actually.
Yeah, Mark, it sounds as though perhaps it's playing, the sound is coming out your speakers and being picked up by your microphone, but not coming through the share.
I hope everybody was able to see that. Yes?
We saw it, but couldn't hear it.
I'm sorry. I had that problem last time and I haven't quite figured it out. So the concerns. So I talked about the V-drive boat, and then also moving the boat motor towards the back of the boat in the design. So wake boats have a 20% angle in the propeller. And then when if you're bringing the bow up again to create as big a wake as possible, you can get propeller wash that's about 30% down. So basically, you're scouring, that prop wash is scouring the bottom of the boat. So, the bottom of the lake. So it can resuspend sediment that's in the boat, phosphorus, or in the lake, like especially phosphorus. It basically it can take plants as well as impact fishing, fish spawning sites. And then it can basically take, if you've got invasive species in your lake, then it can basically rip those up and then can move them around to other parts of the lake. And I know a number of the lakes, the people that have been working with us on this group, they've had some significant issues with weeds, and they've spent a lot of money, on milfoil trying to reduce the amount of milfoil, and these boats again basically are chewing it up and spreading it around. So according to studies, a study done by a gentleman named Alex Ray out of Western Colorado, those boat slipstreams have a potential to affect sediment at a depth of 33 feet. Here's another one. So this is from a lake up association we've been working with up in Maine. On the left-hand picture, well, first of all, in the left-hand picture in the far right side, you'll see a loon nest. The wakeboat path is about 250 feet to the lake, to the left of the picture, and the wake is propagating to the right. So you can see what happens to the wake, the loon nest, once the wave actually hits it. And way back in the beginning, I showed a picture of a loon, probably a lot of people are familiar with. They nest very, very close to the shoreline, so they're more affected by waves and wakes. You know, one of the arguments folks are going to come back with is they're going to say, hey, you know, there's waves and wakes, there's waves on lakes everywhere, right? But, you know, again, another study that we've read and reviewed, the larger waves from these wake boats result in accelerated erosion in the shorelines. And this is I've forgotten where this is. I think it's in Maryland, Deep Creek, Maryland. A lot of concern in all of the studies that we've read, or a lot of the studies we've read about shoreline erosion. So we're not alone in this. Vermont is not alone. There's about 16 states that have some form of discussion going on, or are looking at reviewing, or have regulations in place to regulate wake boats, as well as in Quebec, Canada, Quebec and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe as well. This is a great one. I can put the link in the, this kind of brings it back home a little bit more. Like this gentleman back at the beginning of the year, I really knew nothing about wake boats except what my cousin had showed me. One went by on the lake that he lives on the next lake over. But this gentleman had gone out for a swim. He had never heard about a wake boat. It passed about 200 feet off of shore. The waves started crashing in on it. And when he turned around, he could see that that one wave had undercut a white pine on his shoreline. So a lot of concern. Again, this is local, but a lot of concern about the erosion effect of these. So our request is that we're hoping that you will provide a letter of support. I know Meg's done a lot of work for her lake, and a number of us are, again, we've got a pretty large group. We're hoping that you would consider a letter of support for our petition to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, which we hope to file pretty soon. I think that's it. Questions?
So
I
on
have a
that,
question. Are the did you use the same boat for wakeboarding and wake surfing, or are they a different design of boats for each? And the reason I asked that is it looked like when you early talked about wake surfing, there was a lot more water displacement from that than wakeboarding. Was that a difference in the boats, or is it just a difference in the use?
It's in the difference in the use. So you're probably not going to load the ballast tank up. Again, with wake surfing, you want that wake to be as large as possible, and particularly on one side of the boat. But it can be the same boat for both purposes. I will say that there are a lot of people on our waterways today that do wakeboarding behind boats that are not wake boats. We're not targeting those. Again, that's if you've got like a 75 horse runabout, and you take the kids behind it, wakeboarding, but it's not set up to wakeboard. It doesn't have ballast tanks in it and hull technology. We're not going after that. We're not looking to regulate those. We're looking to regulate wake boats.
If there are wake boats that people own on lakes like Lake Iroquois, are they grandfathered in, or I know wake boats can be anywhere from $80,000 to $200,000, or would they just be asked to take their wake boat out and use it somewhere else on larger lakes?
We've spent a tremendous amount of time on this because on Peach and Pond, we have two as well. One of them, they don't use it as a wake boat. So they don't fill the ballast tanks. They basically bought a very expensive boat for water skiing and tubing for the kids. So we're in our petition, and the petition's not complete yet, but we're getting very, very close. we're trying to, you're not going to be grandfathered in terms of our approach is that you won't be able to, you won't be grandfathered to be able to continue to wakeboard or wake surf. You will be able to continue to use your boat on that lake. So we don't want to we recognize that, again, I think the boat my neighbor has is probably $100,000, right? And they use it for skiing, right? So we're not proposing that they take that off. If they wanted to use it as a wakeboard, wake boat and fill the ballast tanks, then yes, that's a different situation.
Also, I think it's important to mention that what we're doing is writing a petition to DEC, but DEC will be taking up this issue independently. And really, whatever regulations come out of this, rules, what we're asking for is a rule change from DEC. And whatever rule change comes about, it really is important to realize that that's coming from DEC and not from us. We are making a request, but there's going to be a whole process of discussion that happens within DEC, but also with substantial input from public hearings and public comments, just like what always happens. So DEC is going to be looking at this independently and making their determination of what they consider to be fair, reasonable, appropriate to environmental concerns, but they will be weighing all of these various issues and making their own determination of what they think is the best approach to managing these. In essence, we're mostly just asking them to take up the issue and manage wake boats going forward, which so far there is absolutely no regulation of any kind of boats. And we are hoping that this will spur that discussion and they're going to come up with their own solution.
Gary, you have a question?
Well, I read through your petition a little bit, and it seems like, based on what you've said and what I know a little bit about, is that the size of the lake has a dramatic difference in, using wake surfing and such in smaller lakes. So, I think all you put in here is good, but maybe in addition to that, it needs some kind of suggestion that certain size lakes, you just can't do it, regardless of how far you are away from shore. And I know that may further complicate it, but it seems like there is this relationship to size.
You're exactly right, Gary. We're looking at, so I think there'll be groups of lakes. Again, as Meg said, we're putting a request in, and what happens to our request and how it changes. It could look much differently than what we're asking for. But there'll probably be groups. I guess go back to the jet ski, if you remember the jet ski discussion in the state of Vermont, something very similar. So you have lakes now where jet skis cannot be used. It'll probably be the same thing with wake boats. And even within certain size lakes, Vermont's got some pretty good size lakes. There'll be areas, we're proposing there's areas you can use that boat, but so a wake sport, I forgot what we call it, but a wake zone, sport area. So you can take your boat out to that, but it's going to vary from lake to lake under our proposal. But again, as Meg points out, what we're asking might change dramatically after a lot of discussion and public hearings.
We did structure it so that, in effect, there will be a number of small lakes and ponds where wake boat activity is not permitted. So the request that we are making is that wake boat activity must be 1,000 feet from shore and more than 20-foot depth. And if a lake has less than 30 acres of appropriate depth and distance, if it's less than 30 acres, then wake boats will be prohibited from operating on those lakes and ponds. So in effect, for small and shallow lakes and ponds, the goal is that wake boats would not be allowed to operate. And the thinking behind that is that we don't want to make the problem worse by, on those small lakes and ponds where wake boat activity is inappropriate, if you don't prohibit the boats, then people who own them will be going to larger lakes and then coming back and bringing with them the various invasive species that may be present in the larger lakes. So if these boats are not prohibited on the smaller, shallower, inappropriate lakes, if they're not prohibited, arguably the problem could be made worse rather than better with respect to aquatic invasive species.
Reed, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to better understand one thing. It sounds as though with the conversation about grandfathering and the conversation about not wanting to encourage the behavior of using the ballast systems, et cetera, in other lakes and then returning to maybe your home lake or pond where you keep your boat. It sounds like the real issue is the operation of the motor, which causes disturbance, but also the operation of the ballast system. And so am I understanding correctly that if somebody wants to go use a wake boat with the ballast technology, et cetera, on, let's say, a section of Lake Champlain, and then they want to return to their home lake where it doesn't meet those specifications that you have suggested, they could still use their boat on their home pond or lake. They just shouldn't be using it with the ballast system so that they're not taking on and flushing potentially contaminated water. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. And I guess in an ideal world, Reed, we would, I mean, Peachum Pond doesn't have any invasive species. So it would be a bit devastating if we got those. And we do have a boat that goes, a wake boat that travels, the family takes it back and forth between Lake Champlain and this lake here. So, you know, it's like a gun waiting to go off, or I don't know, you know, an accident waiting to happen, right? I mean, we've tried to look at all of this different scenarios and what we can do to protect our lake. I mean, you bounce up against people's rights, right? You know, it's a hard one. You know, it'd be great if if you're going to use your boat in Lake Champlain and then you're going to bring it back to which has got a bunch of invasive species, and then you're going to bring it back to Peachum, you wouldn't use it here in an ideal world, I guess, from my vantage point. And I'll let you know, I've been a boater all my life. I've owned multiple boats, and I'm not anti-boater, but it would just take one boat coming in with invasive species and a person not being able to, our inspector not being able to inspect that, and they dump that water in their lake, and then we're off dealing with invasive species. So.
Okay, thank you.
So the way we've written the petition, wake boats are prohibited on lakes and ponds where wake boat activity is not permitted. The boats themselves, the way it's written, those boats are prohibited. But again, we don't know that DEC will make that determination. That's just our request in the petition.
Yeah,
And
that's your
again,
starting point. You're asking them to begin
right.
from.
Exactly. And so we are asking that they be prohibited on, essentially on smaller lakes and ponds for that reason of transport of aquatic invasive species.
Where does Lake Iroquois fall in these parameters? How big is it? How deep is it?
Lake Iroquois is 250 acres, but there's an island in the middle. So there is not 30 contiguous acres that would be appropriate for wake boat activity. So wake boats would be among the lakes where Lake Iroquois would be among the lakes where wake boats would be prohibited just because of the size. The depth, there are parts of the lake in the middle that are deep enough, more than 20 feet, but there of course are other huge areas that are not deep enough. So the requirement would be 30 contiguous acres, which comes from prior rules and statutes. That's a figure that has been used before to define what would be a safe area for certain boating activities. That was taken from precedent from other types of rules and regulations. So Lake Iroquois would not be a lake that would be considered appropriate for wake boat activity.
Have wake
Is
boats
there a
been
wake boat?
used on Lake Iroquois to date?
There are about two or three shoreline owners who own wake boats, and a few that come in from other lakes. But it's not a huge number at the moment. The problem is it's a very rapidly growing sport. And part of our thinking as a group is we look to other states, for example, North Carolina. We are in touch with someone on a lake in North Carolina where they have seen an explosive growth of wakeboat activities. So while 2 or 3 on any particular lake might not be disruptive, there's a lake about the same, the boating area is about the same size as Lake Iroquois. It's an 800-acre lake in North Carolina, but because of the shallow coves and the winding shoreline, it only has about 250 acres of boatable space. And that lake has seen growth. I think they said somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, there were 19 wake boats on that lake. And now there are 63. So it is a very rapidly growing sport. And the problem is 2 or 3 might be fine, but how about 10? Is 10 okay for Lake Iroquois or for Lake Raponda or for Peachum Pond? Is 20 okay? And at what point do you tell the next person, all your neighbors own wake boats, but you can't buy a new one? So our thinking is the sooner we get ahead of this and get some sort of regulations in place, actually the easier it will be, because then people will not go ahead and buy these boats. And it's kind of, nipping it in the bud versus chasing the tail once it's a problem.
Why isn't the DEC pursuing this on their own? Why do they need a petition?
We have been speaking with Oliver Pearson, who's the head of the Lakes and Ponds Division. And he said that really it just needs to be driven by public support. Like DEC has a number of issues at any time that they are pursuing. And it will just get more attention and more support if DEC recognizes that there is public pressure behind it. So they could take it up themselves, but they have so many other issues that they just likely wouldn't get to it. But once the public gets involved, it puts pressure on them to address it. And that makes it easier for them politically to shepherd that along.
All right.
Can I ask I guess I just have a quick clarifying question, and then I actually have to run. But it seems reasonable to me that as the Conservation Commission, we could ask DEC to look into the issue or ask them to consider the petition, right? And that we don't have to take like a science position on what the outcome should be at this point after just one meeting, and not, like a lot of, I don't feel like I have like the background or like that we've had the in-depth discussion to like draft what our own position on the matter would be, but it seems reasonable to me that we could say, hey, this is a concern. It's a concern that's relevant to people in our town, in our community. We would like DEC to consider what's in this petition and the issue writ large, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? That's not like we're weighing in on what the outcome should be. Does that
Yes,
make sense?
yes, and to some degree, like I said before, that's actually true of all of us. So even the petition is our best guess at a proposed rule, and it's a starting point for DEC. And of course, we hope, having spent all this time developing it, we would hope that they would consider that and perhaps support our language. But there's certainly no guarantees. They're going to do all of their own independent research, and they're going to come up with their own pros and cons and weighing the issue. So what we're looking for from the Conservation Commission is that the way the petition is structured, we have certain named lakes, and Lake Iroquois is one of the named lakes. And what we would like is a show of local support. So if the Conservation Commission wrote a letter, it would be very helpful to say, we support the management of wake boats. We are concerned for Lake Iroquois, which many of you know has just been and arguably still is in the throes of a very significant effort to address Eurasian water milfoil. It's a very controversial issue. A lot of money is being spent on an herbicide solution. And arguably, if the state supports drastic measures and expensive measures to address aquatic invasive species, I would say, doesn't the state have an obligation to address the underlying conditions that give rise to the need for management of aquatic invasive species? So yes, the Conservation Commission can write a letter of support that is as detailed or as vague as you would like. It would be helpful to us if it expressed local support for ongoing efforts at Lake Iroquois.
Lake Iroquois also, I might have to step out for a second, but there's also nesting loons on Lake Iroquois, and there's also a public swimming area.
Correct.
Right, which would be impacted if there were wake boats.
All right, Melinda, to write a letter of support, whether it's, depending on how vague or not we would like to be, does that need to go through the select board? Let's see.
I don't think so. I think you could write a letter if you wanted to.
Okay. Can I suggest that the committee members, we could, Eric, you're here. I don't know if you have an opinion on wake boats or not in Lake Iroquois, but we could decide to write a letter now, or we could table it and, as people think about it, decide how what the letter could look like, and I could have a go at writing one that I could send out for everyone to look at.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I do need a couple minutes, and I will need to abstain from any vote or and not be included in the letter from the Conservation Commission on this particular topic, if that's the direction the commission wants to go. But that's not to say that I am for or against this topic. I just can't be included in this just because of my day job. But I'll just say that, as you all know, I do work in lake management for Lake Champlain, and I've worked on lakes for my whole professional career, starting in Lake George. And so I am very familiar with the experiences of recreational boats and their impacts on lakes, water skiing, wakeboarding, wake surfing, and I've even done wake skating for that matter, which hasn't come up today, and it's kind of a lower thing, but or not as popular these days. But and I'll say that these, from my understanding, these are higher risk vessels for the spread of small-bodied aquatic invasive species. They can, my understanding is that they can be decontaminated, whether or not the owner likes it. I don't know, can't speak to that, but from what I hear from my staff is that they can be decontaminated with high pressure hot water systems, like the one that Lake Iroquois operates. at the public launch there. You know, the data that were presented today are compelling for potential wave impacts to lake shores and the near shore areas of lakes and ponds. And repeated exposure could certainly create a long-term impact on the shore areas. And I've talked with Meg Handler about this before, but and I'll share with you that, you know, from my perspective in lake management, it's about finding a balance and weighing the ecological impacts of a recreational use. And we have talked about this before to some extent anyway on this committee, like in the context of snowmobiles and all-terrain vehicles. It's about finding that balance between the ecological impact of recreational use and the benefit gained by creating the next generation of, in this case, lake advocates. We need to create a safe and create and allow for safe, non-harmful uses that will attract people to our lakes and create that next generation of advocates. And that's, you know, not easy to do, not always easy to do when we're trying to think about constraining or constricting uses in the lakes. Wakeboarding is fun. Wake skating is, wake surfing is fun. I haven't done it in 20 years now, but you know, when I was a lot younger, I enjoyed it. But I also can see the impacts, the potential impacts. I was using a traditional boat, power boat, not one of these new wake boats, but that's, you know, that's my position or my take on these, the potential impact of these topics.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. So could everyone think about whether they would like to, except for Eric, draft a letter to the DEC? Meg, is there a due date for your petition?
We're hoping to get it out by the end of November, but realistically, it will probably happen for sure by the end of this year. We need to have it filed by the end of this year in order for it to be considered in the spring, which is our goal. So for sure, it will go out by the end of the year.
Yeah, and in November might be tough because
Right, I understand. Same for us. I'm not sure that we're going to meet that goal, so I would say December.
Yeah, Laura, I'd love to have time to think about this and to think about what language would be appropriate. Because I certainly am supportive of the concept, the language of what we would write. I think I need to think about personally.
yeah, I agree with that, Reed. So I think for the December 1st meeting, Melinda, if we could just have it on the agenda and just very briefly, people can voice their opinions about what they might want in a letter of support or not support.
Well, to move it along a little faster, Laura, you mentioned that you could draft something and circulate it, and we could look at that and comment back to you on that, and then discuss what you have written and what our comments were. We'd have something more substantial to discuss at the next.
That's a great idea, Carl. That's a great idea. I will do that. And
Laura, I think I did send you a sort of draft of a model, right? Do you have that? Or I could send it again if you don't have it. But
I don't
just a
remember seeing
model.
it.
Okay, I will send you that form. It just has who it's addressed to and an outline of the basic, you know, sort of what we would hope for, which is what is the mission of the Williston Conservation Commission? What are the goals, and how does this petition further your goals? Why do you think it's important? So I have just a model that you could use to sort of plug in your own information into it.
If you could send me that model, I will send my letter and your model on to everyone.
If I could just add one more comment, maybe comment on what Eric said, because I think he was spot on. I think it is important to find a balance for use across, you know, all of the state resources. I've been on Peach and Pond 40 something years. I've been on lakes in Vermont, Groton Pond for, probably 20 years before that. And what I've seen is, and why I got involved by the person who runs our committee on the lake here, lake committee. And basically what I've seen is the balance. There is no balance anymore, right? The boats get bigger and bigger. And again, I'm a boater, but the boats get bigger and bigger and more powerful. The jet skis can literally go from one end of our lake to the other in about 10 seconds now. So technology is changing. It is about balance. And because I think it's hard for me to tell somebody else what they can and can't do. But I think we need to look at these really great resources we have and find that balance. So I appreciate it.
And again, we're not looking to ban wake boats everywhere. They will certainly be permitted on the larger lakes, Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog, Lake Dunmore. There are lakes where it is perfectly fine to use them. The point is only that there are also lakes that are very small and very shallow. And while wake boats are certainly a lot of fun and very appropriate in a number of places, they might not be as appropriate in other places. And that, again, is where that balance comes in. We just, again, that's what we're seeking, is that balance along with protection for smaller lakes and ponds.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. And thank you so much for your presentation, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Meg, if you can send that to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. All right, so we're a little over time, but that was a good conversation, and I think it's worth moving forward as we discussed. So the next.
I gotta go. Sorry to interrupt, Laura, but I agree. That was a good conversation. I'm sorry I can't really help you out on this, but just conflicts with my day job on this one. But
Thank you, Eric.
thank you. Yep. Bye.
All right. So I know that Melinda, you had some the trail user count report that we should look at.
Yeah, I think before I get into that, and actually maybe there isn't time to do that right now. We've only got 15 minutes left, but I wanted to go over the findings and recommendations for DP 2201. Just run it past you one more time, because I know that when you discussed this at the last meeting, there was some, I know Carl had some reservations about voting on it because it wasn't, it was still, there were still a lot of loose ends. So I just want to bring that up for you and just have you look at that one more time. So let me just grab that. Okay, so this one. Now I don't, I have to reshare my screen, I think.
Yeah, we still see the agenda.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that. Hold on. Okay, now. Okay, this guy here. Okay. All right, so trying to. So, all right, so these are the recommendations. Oh, maybe it was the other one. Oh, hold on a second. This is not right. Sorry about that.
You're talking about the smaller subdivision on the other side of the stream.
Oh, was it that one, not the residential zoning district?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Well,
Oh, I think.
we had
think
the
it
most
was.
concerns about the big one at
Yeah.
Trinity Baptist Church. The one
Okay.
on, the other one, I thought we passed unanimously.
Yeah,
right.
Carl, you had problems. You abstained from the
Yeah. from the big one.
recommendations on the first. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry that. Let's try this one more time. Office. Okay. Can you see it now? The recommendations?
Yes.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
have you put changes in these?
Since
Melinda,
the last
or-
time, yes. So, all right, so this one, the second one about the habitat disturbance assessment should be conducted by a qualified wildlife biologist, submitted by the applicant as part of discretionary permit application. A single HDA should be prepared that covers proposed development under DP 2201 and DP 2202. Does that sound
to
right?
to make sure that they're not done in isolation of each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the number 3, to reduce impacts to the view shed, alternate access and relocation of houses should be considered if the habitat disturbance assessment determines that such relocation of houses and or rights would result in impacts to the significant wildlife habitat area, then avoiding habitat impacts should take precedence over avoiding view shed impacts. Does that sound reasonable?
I think that looks like what we discussed.
So is that what, Carl, that you wanted to see changed?
It's hard for me to remember, but I think number 3 is definitely improved, but it's still pretty vague in terms of not specifically saying where we wanted alternate access and relocation of houses. But I think we had a hard time deciding that ourselves, didn't we?
Yeah, well, at this stage, it seems to me that we need to be more specific at the discretionary permit step when we do have all the information. Basically, we're raising a concern, but we don't know what the appropriate solution is until we see that habitat disturbance assessment that encompasses both applications. That's how I feel like number 3. That's what I feel like number 3 is saying, is we're concerned, but we don't know what to recommend based on the information available at the preliminary application stage.
I think that you talked last time about, you had a discussion about, well, if there is going to be an impact to view shed, should that take precedence over any possible impacts to the habitat? And you said you're not going to know what those impacts are until the habitat assessment is done. So you don't really know yet whether the view shed should really be like number 1 priority. So the statement basically reflects that, you're gonna reserve judgment on whether the houses should be relocated until you see a habitat disturbance assessment and know what the, possible impacts are there.
I'm trying to understand what it is we're asking them to do, because the recommendation should have an ask, and it sounds like the ask is they should consider alternate access and relocation of houses in light of the habitat disturbance assessment that is called for. And that
And I
if
don't-
there's conflict, the habitat impacts should be prioritized.
Yeah, if I were them and reading this, I wouldn't know what we were asking them to do. And furthermore, one of the things that I thought about the thing, even though that they're within their density allocation, I thought there were just too darn many dwelling units in the whole thing. So we're not asking them to reduce anything here, and I may be alone in that opinion, but that was one thing that struck me.
Melinda,
Uh,
the density was within, oh, sorry, Laura.
You're asking the same question I was going to ask, so go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, the density was within the residential zoning limits, right, Melinda?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you look at what the allowed density would be, the allowed density would be about 90 plus dwelling units. And so I think they're asking for 58.
Understood.
So I, you know,
It looked like too much.
in my heart, Carl, I feel that way too, but that's a planning, it's a bylaw issue, not an
It's-
application issue.
It's similar to the golf course
Yeah.
Yep.
development. There's just way too many. But yeah, so they're asking for less, but
I
it
understand all that.
it is within the significant wildlife habitat. I guess they all are, but
So what would you like to do? Would you like to strike number 3 entirely at this point?
Well, one thing we could consider, and tell me if you think this is a good idea, Melinda, from a DRB perspective, is changing it from a recommendation to a finding, since we don't have a specific ask at this time, to just say in the findings that the lack of a HDA at the pre-application stage means that the Conservation Commission isn't able to recommend changes to access and location of dwelling units based on habitat disturbance, and we'll need to make those recommendations at discretionary permit.
I would say that's not really a finding. It's not like a finding of fact. It's more,
Exactly, it's an opinion. So I
yeah.
don't know how to express that to the DRB, to basically say, we foresee challenges, but we can't recommend what to do about it until we see the habitat disturbance assessment. So
Well-
maybe it just gets merged with number 2 to say, you know, that changes to recommended changes to access and dwelling unit location may result at discretionary permit, or we leave it out completely.
But
Um,
I just gonna say, could the recommendation just say, we recommend that the decision about habitat disturbance be made later when we have the information? That's what I'm kind of hearing, is we don't have enough information to make that recommendation now.
Am I right that number 3 has to do with view shed and not habitat disturbance assessment? Really, we could say because there are impacts in the view shed. alternate access and relocation may be considered depending on a habitat disturbance assessment determination. I don't know, something like that. Because 3 is about the view shed and not about habitat disturbance assessment.
I mean, I think that what I'm sensing is there's some ambivalence about I mean, I think what I heard pretty clearly was that if there are impacts, given impacts to both of these resources, a higher priority should be placed on impacts to wildlife habitat. And I think it could be assumed that if you move the houses closer to the significant wildlife habitat area, that those impacts will be increased. We don't know
Right.
for sure what those impacts are until a habitat assessment is done. But you could just make a decision that you're going to prioritize habitat and just state that, just say, we know that there are going to be impacts to the view shed, but we want to prioritize impacts to significant wildlife habitat or something to that. And maybe
Well-
just forget about this, considering alternate access because it'll impact the view shed. I don't know. That's just.
So I just have a question to go back. Is the reason why they didn't have an HDA done is because they didn't know they were in a
They don't,
significant-
they're not required to do that until DP. They're
Right.
not required to do that.
We're
for
not there
pre-
yet.
Okay, so even though they are in a known significant wild habitat, I mean, the planning board has to make that decision, or not the planning board, the planning staff.
They.
At pre-application, nobody's required, right, Melinda?
No,
to-
it's
to do-
pre-application, and they're not
Yeah.
going to be required to do that until DP because they don't even know if they're going to get growth management allocation.
Yeah.
So there's not an expectation that the applicant spend the money to do an assessment if they don't
Okay.
know they're even going to go forward. So
Okay, because it would just seem to avoid this problem if they had it done ahead of time and we wouldn't have to be.
That's why the process is iterative. That's why we see pre-application to determine whether it's even reasonable for development to take place, given the conservation impacts. And then if it's reasonable in some form, then the next step is at the DP review to say, okay, now that you're serious about moving forward with doing some sort of development, let's talk about the exact location of the dwelling units. What are those building envelopes? What are the impacts? What does the deep HDA say about those impacts? So I agree with you, Melinda. I think number 3 should change from talking about the view shed and alternate access and relocation of houses to rather being a statement of the Conservation Commission's preference in the case of this proposed project to prioritize impacts to the SWHA over any impacts to viewshed. That would be my preference.
So Reed, how would you change number 3?
I would change it to say, given that impacts to either viewshed or significant wildlife habitat area seem inevitable with this project, the Conservation Commission would like to see impacts to the SWHA prioritized by the applicant in their discretionary permit application. Something like that. Feel free to chop it up, people, and rewrite it. And I do have about 5 minutes, Laura, until I have to drop as well for work. That I like what you wrote, Melinda. How does everybody else feel about that? Does it feel better?
Yeah, I like that also.
Any wisdom, Carl?
Well,
You still don't like it. I see your
I think
head shake.
I think what you've written is fine. I also think what Melinda wrote initially was fine too. I'm still going to abstain from voting in favor of this because of really more of my general disagreement with the size of the whole development, even though it fits within what's required. If it didn't fit within what was required, I would vote against it, but I can't really vote against it since it does fit within it. So I'm still going to abstain. For what you've written here is
Understood.
fine.
Okay, thank you, Carl. I do think we should take a vote. Do I hear a motion to accept these recommendations as amended?
So moved, Laura.
A second?
I guess I'll second it. So we, I guess, continue to work on it. I mean, it's going to go through the next step and the HDA will be done, right?
Yep, we'll see an HDA with the discretionary permit stage where we will again provide recommendations to the DRB.
Right, and then we'll be able to use that information to determine whether it should be that the development should be shifted. So,
Can I make one comment?
Of course.
Obviously, I wasn't there for this, but it seems like what we're saying here is that we're giving them permission to impact one of these issues. Whereas to me, it seems like they should try to have no impact on the view shed or minimal impact on view shed and minimal impact on wildlife habitat. So it seems a little weird for us to put this in writing. Right now we're thinking that, there's going to be impacts on both without really knowing, and that we're saying it's okay to impact the view shed, but not the wildlife habitat.
Yeah, so you're saying, Gary, that you would prefer to see them showing effort to avoid both.
Well,
Yeah, that's.
The conversation that was had last time reflected that there is a tension between these two goals. And there's not really a way to avoid impacts to both, or even to minimize impacts to both, because if you move the houses out of view, they're going to be close to the significant wildlife habitat area. That's really the only choice.
The alternative is to recommend that they reduce the amount of housing to reduce impacts to both.
That's what I was going to say. The alternative is to don't develop in that area.
Another option was they were asked to move the soccer field or the playing field over to that area where the significant wildlife habitat is, and to move the houses over there. But then there was the whole discussion about the road, the curb cuts, and so close to the intersection, and that they wanted the church part to be one parcel and the development to be another.
You make a compelling argument, Gary, and it really supports what you were talking about, Carl, that maybe the bylaw says density wise that sure, that number of units are are appropriate in terms of the acreage, but that doesn't mean that it's appropriate in terms of the impacts to the view shed and in this case, the SWHA.
Well, so the kicker to all this is the language at the very beginning of chapter 27 that says consistent with the landowner's rights. So, unfortunately.
It
Same
doesn't mean
with
that
all these developments.
it doesn't mean that we
Yeah.
can't recommend from a conservation perspective that this is not a good idea and the DRB can still decide to move forward. You guys have sort of convinced me, Gary and Carl, that this is the opportunity to say that from the Conservation Commission's perspective, this is a problematic proposal because there's no way to both avoid viewshed impact and SWHA impact with the number of units currently proposed.
Mhm.
Is this development within the growth center or is this outside? This is,
It's in the residential zoning district.
oh, that's right, okay.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I think, so my intention in bringing this again to you, it was not to like make a
Rehash.
drastic change. Just the fact that the applicant isn't here and at this point, half the commission is not here is unfortunate.
Is there some, by saying no development and we don't recommend, are we going to lose some kind of say in what happens in this development?
I think I wouldn't advise just saying the Conservation Commission recommends that this development not happen because.
Yeah, well, what if number 3, we
happen.
just modify it to include that given that the project as proposed with however many units it was, Melinda, do you have that number?
58.
As proposed with 58 units will result in impacts to both viewshed and SWHA.
Mhm.
Basically, the DRB needs to figure out how to balance the rights of the landowner with the fact that we can tell it's going to impact both.
So what are we saying?
I think if we just say no development, which we know is going to happen anyway, I hate to say it, that we need to, use this habitat disturbance assessment to still have a conversation and still talk about what the best solution would be. Because if we say no development, why would we even suggest having a habitat assessment? So we might be able to have some kind of say and to improve the development in the habitat assessment. And I would hate to see them just say, okay, well, we're just going to put in the 98 units since you're not willing to work with us. And not have I'm not saying to give in, but we know it's going to happen. So we be able to have the trailhead there and to know what the habitat assessment disturbance is going to be.
What do you think about that?
I think you're getting there. Let me just read it again.
I don't feel like.
I like it better. I hear you, Terry. I feel like the DRB is going to say, yeah, we're going to side with the right of the landowner to develop the land to at least to whatever they determine is a reasonable extent. but I like number 3 better than what we had.
I
Lisa?
feel, I'm feeling, I don't know. I am feeling very uncomfortable about changing this recommendation
Yeah,
when the applicant hasn't been invited to this meeting to.
yep. I was gonna say, in terms of a point of order, if we're changing more than just
Yeah,
the words with the same meaning, it really needs to be warned.
yeah.
How about the conservation recommends that the applicant prioritize the minimization of impacts to the SWA over viewshed impacts if the number of units cannot be reduced.
Again, I wasn't there for this, but is it really the number of units or how it's designed? I mean, couldn't they put the same number of units in a different area? But
It really would require reduction of units, Gary. It was, no
okay,
matter which, yeah, it was like if you shift it this way, it's gonna impact the viewshed more. If you shift it that way, it's gonna impact SWHA more. And no matter what, it's impacting both to a certain extent.
I kind of went through all that with the
yeah,
discussion
okay.
last time.
Sorry.
But no, it's okay. I mean, you didn't get a chance to see it.
I mean, I like this much better the way we've got it, but I agree with Melinda that we can't just sling this to the DRB without the applicant knowing that we're doing it.
I mean,
So-
I hate to
Well,
say it, but we could warn a special meeting with just this one topic, right, Melinda, of the Conservation Commission?
Yeah,
I'm just thinking that, this happened at the Catamount Golf Course where a group was trying to get the number of units reduced and there was they actually increased the amount of units.
So
Sorry,
should we-
Laura, I have to drop to get on my work meeting. I'm so sorry. It's a tough pickle that we're in, but
of course, I understand.
And what about if we just remove that with 58 dwelling units? I just say as proposed. Is that, I know it looks like you were just thinking of that, Melinda.
Yeah, that could work also. I know Reed has to leave though. Melinda,
different-
when does the DRB need to see this?
I'm writing my staff report now and it's gotta go out the door by Thursday, tomorrow. So
So do we even have enough people left to change this? Should we just leave it as it was?
it doesn't seem like you have enough people to change it at this point.
So,
In your staff report, can you say that
there was
that the
conversation about this.
commission did
Right.
not come to a clear recommendation on this particular issue? That's sort of where we stand now. No way to change it between now and tomorrow.
I mean, I guess what I could do is leave it as it was when you last voted for it and just make a note that, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's pre-app, so it's not like, you're gonna get another shot at this at DP.
all right. Does everyone agree that we should leave it as is? I think that's the only way forward because we're going to see this again.
I don't think we have a choice, do we, right now?
So,
Yes,
Yeah, I agree.
We're stuck.
I thought it was gonna be simply a matter of semantics, and I obviously should have brought it to your attention at the beginning of the meeting.
yeah, sorry, Melinda, that I let the wakeboarding discussion go over. Okay, well, so Melinda, if you could put that back in your report. I mean, you know how to word it and mention that maybe there was someone abstaining because they think that there should not be housing units in the viewshed or the SWA and that they should be reduced. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah,
Or at least that there were reservations about that particular recommendation.
right.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. And I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving, and it's gonna be 4 a.m. in California when it's time for our next meeting, and I'm gonna be getting on a plane, so Terry will be chairing that meeting.
I hope with help from Melinda.
And the rest of the group. So
Hopefully it's gonna be an easy.
it will be. Okay, well, thank you and have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.